Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about self love, self acceptance, all of that good stuff, but through the lens of Islam. And it's actually kind of funny because I've spoken about this a few times and I teach my clients this, and I don't think I've ever done an episode on it here on this podcast. So I was like, wait a minute, I should really do this because so many of us could benefit from hearing this and learning how to do this for ourselves. Because I'm not the only one who, at the age of nearly 40 now, finally has learned to love and appreciate myself for who I am and not constantly seeing flaws within myself and constantly feeling like I need to fix something within myself, but for once really accepting, like, oh, maybe nothing's wrong with me. Maybe I'm exactly the way I'm meant to be, and embracing that and finding strengths in it. But it kind of had to go through some work, and it had to come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know that sounds a little strange, but that's what we're here to talk about today. How my self-love and self-acceptance didn't actually come from working on myself. It didn't come from looking a specific way, from acting a specific way, from people giving me their acceptance or whatever, like for people to recognize me in a specific light or anything. It came from me finding peace and a healthy relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in turn has affected my self-love and self-appreciation, and that is now what I teach people. So like everybody else, I've had, especially growing up in the 90s and stuff with, this obsession with being skinny, and we're seeing it again now, in Hollywood and stuff. And as someone who very much has North African genetics, Arab genetics, my body likes to be on the slightly heavier side rather than the skinnier side. So growing up and in my early adulthood and stuff, I very much was struggling with body image, making sure that I would stay smaller, kind of forcing my body into something that it didn't necessarily want to be in, like in a state that it didn't necessarily want to be in. And it required a lot of work, like exhausting work sometimes, but feeling like I had to do that in order for me to love and accept myself and my body for what it was. Same thing with my character as well. This is not just about body image, by the way. This is just like some examples of some things that I've healed through my relationship with Allah. But like with my character being a very introverted person, and then at the same time being quite public, like I'm showing up publicly all the time, with TikTok, YouTube, podcasts. Like I'm very active, and I think a lot of people sometimes have this misunderstanding of they think that I'm a very extroverted person because of it, and I am a very introverted person. I don't like to hang out with people. It's very exhausting to me. And for a long time, I thought I had to kind of get over that because I felt like in order for me to be liked and accepted, I had to be very outgoing, because a lot of people almost relied on me being the clown and the one to sort of like cheer everybody up and be energetic and make everybody laugh and everything. And so I felt like I had to sort of be different to what I felt comfortable. So I was always exhausted for a long period of time. And for some time as well, I also used alcohol to keep me going in situations like that, like very, very unhealthy coping mechanisms to keep me going in a direction that I felt like I had to be in order for me to be accepted and to be liked, or even for myself to like me, because I felt like that's what I had to do to uphold certain standards and whatever. And then at the same time being like, oh my god, maybe I'm annoying, maybe I'm too much, and like it's always a double ended sword, or whatever it's called, double-sided sword, double-ended sword, I don't know, whatever it's called, that thing. But ultimately, like, there are so many ways in which many of us can struggle with accepting ourselves, loving ourselves, and being okay with who we are. And whether it's like a personality thing, or if it's like a like a looks thing, body image, or something else, I think it's very important for us to learn how to work on that. And especially as Muslims as well, I think it's quite often I mean, it's not that like body image issues and stuff like that doesn't exist, but it's not necessarily talked about as much. And I think it's because there's like this overarching idea that you shouldn't focus on that. You should rather focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it can be easy to sort of like dust it off and be like, oh, let's not talk about that. Like, you just need to pray more. You just need to be good with this and that. And that's not really helping a situation either. So many people can be sort of like left a little bit to their own devices and never really quite learning how to love and appreciate themselves for who they are. And it's kind of sad because we actually have the biggest advantage as Muslims because we have Allah. And when we know how to, I'm going to use the words take advantage of Allah. Like, that sounds awful, astaghfirullah, but like take advantage of the fact that we have Allah, I think is a better way of putting it. But understanding how we can use Allah, we can also use the fact that we have Allah to work on our self-esteem, our confidence, the way we love and appreciate ourselves, whether or not we accept who we are. And that is simply by the fact that we know and understand that Allah doesn't create by mistake. Allah doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't create something and be like, oh, that was like an error, but oh well, guess we'll just kind of have to deal with that. Everything Allah does is with intention. There is a purpose behind it. And so that also then means that when Allah created you, when He created me, when He created all of us, each and every single one of us, there was a purpose with everything He placed within us and outside of us, outside of us in terms of like our body and stuff. So the vessels that He gave us, there was a purpose with it. So if you're born with small lips or big lips, there was a purpose for that. If you were born with curly hair or straight hair, there was a purpose with it. If you were born skinny or fat, there was a purpose with it. That there's a reason for it. Allah doesn't create by mistake. He creates for a purpose. I'm going to get into now, because I know that some people will be like, yeah, but lifestyle, and you weren't born fat, maybe you gained a lot of weight and whatever. And that there are definitely certain arguments that can be made in terms of sort of saying looking after yourself, especially when it comes to like the physical, whether you're skinny or fat, or if you're living on an unhealthy life and you just don't have strength, so you feel quite weak all the time, or something like you got bad back because you're not working on strengthening your back muscles, things like that. And even in situations like that, we can still say, well, Allah gave me the body, so I will take care of it, and so we will do what's right, not from a place of self-hatred and disgust or shame or anything like that, but because we appreciate what Allah gave us. So it still comes from a position of acceptance of the self rather than judgment of the self and criticizing of the self. So it's not to say that, if, you start smoking and now you have poor health or bad cardio or whatever, and you stop smoking, or that you shouldn't stop smoking because Allah doesn't. No, that was your decision. You started smoking. So if you want to, have better health, then if through the lens of Islam, you look at it, you can say, well, Allah gave me this body and He gave me the lungs. So I want to start looking after it. So I'm going to stop smoking because that is how I can show appreciation for the body, but not because I'm shaming myself for it. I'm doing it because I'm coming from a place of love. I love the body that Allah has given me. I love the health that Allah has given me, and I'm maybe compromising that, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to start, looking after myself. Do you see the difference? So it's not a question of, oh, I'm just going to accept every situation that I'm in, especially if it's situations that can be avoided, or like that sometimes we put ourselves in situations that are not always beneficiary to us. But other than that, most other things, like as I said, the size of our lips, the nose, the ears, if we have a tendency to carry more weight, like myself, I have a tendency to carry a lot of weight in my arms and my stomach, and I used to hate myself so much for it, and my body for it, for years and years and years and years. And sometimes it'll still creep up on me, and then at the same time, when it creeps up on me now, I'm like, well, Allah designed you that way. That's how Allah decided for your body to look, and you can hate it, or you can appreciate that Allah doesn't make mistakes in the designs, and so you start loving it and appreciating it because Allah doesn't create in error. And so I think when I started really thinking of it in that way of appreciating what Allah gave me instead of trying to change it all the time, I started accepting me for who I was. And so there was the physical aspect or the health aspect as well that we kind of spoke into a little bit as well. But then there's also the aspect of sort of my identity, who I am, what I enjoy. As I said, being an introvert, for instance, having one thing that I use as an example quite a lot when I speak to my clients is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me a really, really loud voice. And I know you're not hearing it right now because I've learned to control it. But growing up, all I heard was like, oh my God, Zara, you're so loud. Your voice carries. Oh my God, I could hear you a mile away, blah, blah, blah. And it became such an insecurity for me growing up. And then it took quite a long time, like many, 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 many years for me to figure out that my voice is actually really powerful. And it doesn't surprise me now that what I actually do for a living requires for me to speak up because people listen. And so I had to make sure that I also understood, well, Allah gave me this voice, so how can I best use this tool that Allah gave me? And I believe that part of my purpose in this dunya is to help people with their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and part of it is through podcasts and TikToks and stuff. And I can't be quiet. So Allah gave me a big voice. And so when I use it correctly, it is to my benefit and in His worship. Whereas I could also choose to use it in a different way. And then, it's a choice that may not always bear fruits with it. So, and that could be sort of me saying, oh, I need to change my voice. Maybe I need to have a surgery on my voice, something like that, to minimize my voice. I need to stop speaking. And now I'm working against what Allah gave me because I'm not accepting it for what it is. And I think the distinction of, being able to accept it and then working with it in Allah's worship in whatever way that may be. And sometimes it's not just like, oh, in prayer and stuff. It's also the way that you live your life, the way that you speak, the way you hold yourself, the way you carry yourself, the way you are with other people also plays a significant role in that kind of worship. So when you're looking at yourself, you're no longer just thinking, what do other people see in me and how do other people perceive me, or even myself? How do I see me, perceive myself? But rather, how would Allah like me to use what He gave me? And that is in the body, in the identity, in the skills and the talents that He has given us, in everything. I know, Chicken Alfredo, but the table is a bit wobbly, so every time you're trying to caress the table, everything wobbles. He's so cute. Little Chicken Alfredo, come here. You can sit here so the people who are watching the video might be able to see your pretty face or your butt, whichever. So ultimately, when we can change the perspective now from I am full of mistakes, I'm not skinny enough, I'm too loud, I'm annoying, I'm not funny enough, I'm too introverted, I'm this, I'm that, I don't have this skill, I don't have that talent, to I'm created in exactly the way that Allah meant to create me. So there has to be a reason and a purpose behind it. And also, you're standing right in front of the camera, my love. Nobody can see me. They're literally looking in your butt. I'm so sorry. I'm going to put you on. Banana. I'm going to put you down. Put him down and then throw away the microphone at the same time. I'm back. Okay, we're not going to cut that out. That's cute. Well, in my world at least. Yeah, so starting to see yourself from the perspective of, if Allah creates everything without error, without mistakes, then that must mean there's a reason for everything, even the things within me that I used to criticize or didn't appreciate, and start seeing it from the perspective of, how can I use this to my advantage, whether it is spiritually, religiously, or in my career, or however it might be, for the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the purpose of worship, to live in accordance with what He has given me, instead of, astaghfirullah, inadvertently saying Allah made a mistake and it's up to me to rectify it. Do you hear that? Astaghfirullah. Again, it's I know that that's not how we want to think about it, because we're just thinking, no, 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 but I would look cuter if this, that, and the other. And if my nose wasn't so big or small or whatever, bulbous, or if my hair was less frizzy, or if I just could laugh a little bit more feminine, or if I just could learn how to carry myself in one way or the other. And we think it to ourselves like, I'm not actually doing anything wrong here. I'm just trying to improve myself. But in reality, if it is just who you inherently are, then what you're subconsciously saying is Allah made a mistake, right? Because Allah doesn't create in mistakes. So if He made you that way, you're now saying, it is up to me to correct Allah's work. Astaghfirullah, right? And when we think about it, and it really is that deep. It really is that deep. And that's what we have to understand as Muslims, is that it is that deep. It has to be that deep, because on Yawm al-Qiyamah, we also have to, we have to answer to everything, right? So we also have to answer to if we undergo cosmetic surgery, choose to have certain enhancements, things like that. Now, there are things for medical reasons, and then there's for the purely aesthetic and stuff. And so if we're choosing to do something purely for the aesthetic reason, we're going to have to explain to Allah, you created me wrong. I think you did it wrong. And I just, maybe it's just me, but I feel that thought kind of terrifies me, to have to say to Allah, you did it wrong with me. Like you did everything so good and so great. And then when it came to me, you made all of these mistakes. Or something, like if it's not something like that, it could be something with, your character, your personality. Again, as I said, like I could maybe, if I let the insecurity around my voice when I was younger get to me, maybe have some type of surgery where they, I don't know, lessons. I don't know if you can have a surgery on your voice. I think you can. Or I could just literally stop talking and just be like, I'm never going to speak. Because there was a point where I was like just trying to be this soft little demure, mystical little being who just kind of sat quietly in the corner. I'm not her either. I'm an introvert, but I'm not a quiet person. Um, and then I would have to tell Allah, when He said, I gave you the voice so that you could speak and you could guide, you know, and then me saying, yeah, well, actually, I was just loud and annoying, and my voice was too big, so I couldn't do it because I didn't feel like you did it right. Like, I mean, again, astaghfirullah, just imagine having to have those kinds of conversations with Allah, and saying, I didn't trust your decision to make me in this way, so I changed myself, and I hid myself away in what felt more socially acceptable for me at that time. And that's also just so sad. That is just so sad, especially if, we can appreciate Allah's creation and everything else, and we see it in the minuscule, like in the cells and the, all of those amazing things, and also in the grand scheme, like space and earth and the sea life and all sorts of stuff. And we're like, wow, and Allah's created all of this, and this is amazing. And then when it comes to ourselves, we don't see the amazing things within ourselves. We just see things to be criticized and things to be changed, instead of, it has nothing to do with changing who you are. It's just about stepping into who you are. Accept it, step into it, and start being who you actually are from a place of confidence. No, you're not always going to wake up and be like, I love myself. That's not what it's about. It's not like a narcissistic ego trip that we're on. It's a place where we can stop criticizing ourselves long enough for us to actually live in our powers that Allah has given us, instead of constantly fighting against ourselves. And so maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe you're exactly the way you're meant to be. And actually, what is wrong and what's delaying you and what's making you miserable is the fact that you keep telling yourself that something's wrong with you, and that you're allowing other people to convince you that something's wrong with you. And you're going to be miserable the longer you stay in that narrative, because you're going to keep trying to change something that was never meant to be changed to begin with. And in fact, the sooner you can step into who you actually are with acceptance of the way that Allah has created you, the easier it'll be for you just to be and actually enjoy your time in this dunya for who you are, except for who you're not. And again, I just feel like here at the end of this episode, I want to just, again, just give little reminders that this has nothing to do with, certain choices that we make. So, for instance, if we live an unhealthy lifestyle, we want to respect the body that we live in. And whether that comes in a small frame or in a big frame, we still want to make sure that we're being healthy. So, it has nothing to do with whether or not you need to lose weight or gain weight or something. It's literally just a question of, if you know that you can look after your body better, that's probably what you should be doing as well, right? Like, so that's not a question of like, well, Allah created me this way. No, no, no. There's also certain choices that we're now making that could potentially harm ourselves, right? The same thing can be said about like, or not the same thing can be said, but like another point to make here is also, of course, you can improve upon yourself. If Allah gave you a skill, you can hone that skill, you can improve that skill, you can learn more about it, right? So it's still a progress, it's still a journey. But instead of trying to run away from it all the time, the more we can step into it, the easier it becomes for us. And the more we start looking at ourselves as Allah's creations, truly as Allah's creations, and what's the best of creation, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says about mankind, the easier it becomes to stop criticizing yourself and start appreciating what Allah has actually created in you. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope what I tried to share here makes sense. I feel like it does, and this is usually a conversation that I have where I'm speaking directly to a client, and so usually it's like a two-way conversation, and they'll share certain things, and so I can kind of like bounce off a little bit of what they're saying and stuff, and give more specific examples for them. So if that's something that you want as well, reach out to me. We can book you in for some coaching and stuff, and teach you how to sort of merge your identity with yourself as a Muslim and Allah's creation, so that you can start to learn to love and appreciate yourself exactly as you are, instead of constantly feeling like you have to hack it and change it and whatever else it might be. Yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I will see you, inshallah, next week for another one. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.